Pearl is the ninth film by filmmaker Ty West. He's not as much of a household name as Eli Roth, but has arguably as much filmmaking cred amongst horror fans, and is someone who has threatened to break into the mainstream since his minimalist horror debut, The Roost. Pearl is the kind of film that, in a perfect world, would in fact catapult him to that new arena. It's as confident, assured, multi-layered, and brimming with cinematic innovation as anything the other great horror directors have made. Mia Goth's performance in particular is a revelation and should wake up anyone who has been hesitant to see her as a top-tier actress. West is a great mimic. He seems to understand the styles and techniques of old-school horror maestros and adapts them for his own purposes, spinning them off into personalized homages without trampling on or disrespecting those old-school horror masters. I must say that West and I have something in common, in the sense that I am also someone who believes many of these old filmmaking styles and techniques have merit and are worth preserving, instead of being forgotten and replaced by modern aesthetics. Perhaps West has a desire to influence audiences to seek out and understand these old styles, to educate the masses on just what made these old-school techniques so effective. Pearl is the culmination of West's dogged pursuit of memento perfection, doing his best to honor the tradition of old-school filmmaking, while bringing his own unique point of view to the table to try and create something greater. Or rather, to synthesize different elements that may not at first seem compatible, but prove impossible to ignore. In the case of Pearl, what at first may seem like a nonsensical pairing of the old Technicolor extravaganzas and savvy melodramas of the past, with the more modern psychological thriller and slasher horror elements of the modern day, end up being a perfect kind of petri dish experiment that shines a new light on both sides. Because what ends up being the very hopeful, but ultimately naive fantasies presented in the old Technicolor extravaganzas could never hold up to the scrutiny and cold consequence of the real world and its myriad of complications. Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz would probably end up an embittered, disillusioned old maid after waking up and realizing her trek through Oz could never have possibly taken place. Just like the exaggerated characters in your average Douglas Sirk melodrama couldn't possibly survive in the real world using the absurdly over-the-top social techniques on display in those movies. Is this West questioning his own reliance on these different styles? The dream of stardom and being the center of attention is at the heart of those stories, because that is ultimately what melodrama is, the extreme desire to be the focus of the conversation in a world doing its best to keep you under its harsh boot. Is Pearl West's self-reflexive desire to confront this need and, as a result, make something people are forced to pay attention to? The wild card here is Mia Goth. Her performance as Pearl is a near miracle, the kind of self-assured virtuoso performance that wins awards, or at the very least the hearts and minds of those who doubted her in the first place. Pearl is the kind of multi-layered, complex, and fully realized character that you rarely see in slasher films. Those characters are generally simplified and homogenized to make them easier for audiences to consume in a more admittedly disposable genre, and for the bloodletting to better take center stage. But in Pearl, the searing, nearly fourth-wall-breaking monologue the title character has toward the end of the film is something that cannot be denied nor lumped in with those other more simplistic horror performances. Goth, who also co-wrote the film, forcefully and quite spectacularly, with this monologue, jettisons herself into the same company as Anthony Perkins' brilliant turn in Psycho, Bette Davis's iconic performance in Whatever Happened to Baby Jane, and Anthony Hopkins' scene-stealing genius in The Silence of the Lambs. Pearl's extensive monologue was long, extremely risky, and in the theater I saw the film in, noticeably draining for the audience watching it. It is probably the bravest piece of cinema I've seen in years, and all of this from a supposedly mere slasher film. In today's self-conscious and self-serving culture, where it's not cool to admit flaws or take risks, West and Goth's dare to the audience to sit there and take that monologue without flinching is one of the bravest things I've seen this industry do in a very long time, and I have an immense amount of respect for both of them for being brave enough to risk it in the presence of attention span starved audiences. In the end, when Pearl's war-scarred husband returns home and lays eyes on the sickening horror she's manifested, with a strained and desperate smile stretched across her face, it's as if Goth and most of all West is saying, "Here I am, warts and all. Reject me or accept me. This is what I am, and this is all I have to give." For people like myself who've watched West grow and mature into a filmmaker daring to become more than the myriad of filmmaking styles he's utilized from days past, it's impossible for me not to be proud and galvanized by what I've witnessed in his latest cinematic love letter called Pearl. If you enjoyed this video, consider hitting the like and subscribe button, as I'll be posting more content in the future. Thanks for watching.